Hi, it's Kevin Patton, and I have another study tip for human anatomy and physiology. This time it's regarding muscles and how muscle names can be a shortcut to learning the muscles, where they're at and what they do. You've probably been given a list by your instructor as to what muscles you need to be able to identify, or maybe it's a list that's in your lab manual. In any case, once you look at all those muscle names, it looks like a lot of gibberish, doesn't it? Looks like it's written in a foreign language. Well, you know what? It is. Even the English versions of these muscle names are derived from Latin. And that's something that's very useful to know. You might think it's a hindrance, but actually it's a help. Let's take a look at this group of muscles that are adductor muscles. That is, they have the word adductor in their name. And as you can imagine, these are muscles that do adduction. That is, they adduct, in this case, the femur, by bending the hip joint and bringing the leg toward the midline or median plane of the body. Now, the first one we have shown there is in green, and it's called adductor magnus. Adductor means it's an adductor muscle, of course, and magnus is the Latin word for great or large. And you can see it's a very large muscle. We can't really see the whole thing in this view because there are a couple other muscles in the way. As a matter of fact, those muscles are adductor muscles as well. For example, the one highlighted in yellow now is adductor brevis, and brevis is a Latin word that means brief or short. And as you can see, it is very short compared to adductor magnus, isn't it? And then we look at the third one with adductor in its name, and it's adductor longus. And, well, as you can imagine, longus means long. And so it's longer than brevis. And, of course, magnus is really huge compared to all of them. So we have three different adductor muscles, all very close to one another. And so how do you tell them apart? Well, they're names. One is very big, one is short, and one is long. Now, one weird thing about Latin that you probably have already noticed is the words seem to be backwards in the phrase. Let's take a closer look at that. In English, when we have a phrase like red wagon, in Latin it would be rendered as wagon red instead, of course using Latin words, not English words, but this is to show the word order. So there's a different word order in these two languages. And so the modifier, which is the adjective, in this case red, is modifying a noun, which in this case is wagon. And so the modifier comes after the term that it modifies in Latin, which is backwards from English. Let's look at another example. Big red wagon. In Latin, that would be rendered as wagon, red, big. So the modifiers come after the term that's being modified. So let's apply that to one of these Latin names, like, ooh, here's a long one, extensor carpi radialis brevis. That sounds like a mouthful, but it's really kind of a whole phrase or sentence in Latin. And extensor, of course, is going to extend a part, that is, stretch it out. And carpi means of the wrist, remember carpal bones or the wrist bones. Radialis in this case means pertaining to or near or at the radius bone of the forearm. And then brevis we already know means short. So if we put that all together and translate it into a good English word order, it means the short wrist stretcher at the radius, which tells you an awful lot about that muscle, where to find it and what it does. Now there are some other names of muscles that are not whole phrases but describe some aspect of the muscle, like the gracilis muscle. Shown here, we see it's a muscle that is a long, slender muscle, and that's what the term gracilis means, is slender. So the gracilis muscle is the slender muscle. Another mnemonic device you might be able to use is graceful. It's a long, slender, graceful muscle. Here's another one with a kind of odd name, but when you translate it into Latin, it makes a lot of sense. The buccinator or buccinator muscle is a muscle of the cheek, and it's called the trumpeter muscle. And that's because when you're blowing a trumpet, you really need to use this muscle to compress the air in your mouth and thus push it into and through the trumpet. Now, where are you going to learn all this stuff? You maybe you haven't taken a Latin class, probably have not taken a Latin class, or two or three. And so, how are you going to figure this out? Well, I suggest the survival guide for anatomy and physiology. And if you use this little link here. You can type that into your browser and get to a description of that book, and not only explain how to do this, but I give you some tables on how to do the translation. And a free resource that you can download yourself is this list of muscle names that you can download from my site at lionden.com. And so here's the URL for that, so type that into your browser and you can download a couple different versions of my muscle name list that has the translation of the name, at least of some of the major muscles, not every muscle in the body. That and other study tips are always available for you at my blog, which is found at theapstudent.org.